Good morning. I'm Alexa, and this is Inside News, bringing you the stories that shape our world beyond the headlines. Today, October 4th, 2025, we examine the week's critical developments from September 27th through today. We begin in North Africa, where Morocco faces unprecedented civil unrest. Youth-led protests organized through TikTok and Discord by the collective GenZ 212 have escalated into violent confrontations across multiple cities. The demonstrations, sparked by the deaths of 8 women in an Agadir public hospital, have spread to Rabat, Saleh, and Marrakesh, exposing systemic failures in public services. Security forces killed 3 protesters during an attempted assault on a gendarmerie in Leklia, marking the first fatalities of this movement. Prime Minister Aziz Akhanouche faces mounting pressure as demonstrators demand reforms in education, healthcare, and anti-corruption measures. Organizers have called for a 6th night of protests, highlighting youth unemployment and social inequality. In Sudan, the humanitarian crisis intensifies. United Nations reports document at least 91 civilian deaths in El-Fasher during September attacks by the Rapid Support Forces. Satellite analysis reveals the paramilitary group has constructed nearly 68 kilometers of earthen barriers encircling the city, leaving one narrow passage. Civilians face impossible choices: remain and risk bombardment, famine, or atrocities if RSF captures the city, or flee and face summary executions, sexual violence, and kidnappings. Advanced weaponry flows into the conflict, including Chinese anti-aircraft systems and drones similar to those used by Houthis in Yemen, threatening regional security. In South Kordofan, civil war continues as a major front with intense fighting. A separate UN report reveals 3,384 civilians were killed in Sudan during the first half of 2025, primarily from ethnic violence in Darfur and brutal combat in Khartoum. The UN characterizes this as the world's worst humanitarian crisis and calls for immediate ceasefire and humanitarian access. Turning to East Africa, Kenyan activists Bob Njagi and Nicholas Oyo were abducted in Kampala, Uganda, on October 1st after attending an opposition rally for presidential candidate Bobi Wine. Armed assailants forced them into vehicles in the Kareka district. Wine condemned the kidnapping, accusing President Yoweri Museveni's regime of targeting activists for their association with him. Both Kenyans, members of the Free Kenya movement, came to support Wine's campaign in regional solidarity. The Kenya High Commission has engaged Ugandan authorities for their release. Amnesty International Kenya and the Law Society characterize this as human rights violations, recalling similar cases involving activists Boniface Mwangi and Agatha Atuhaire, detained in Tanzania earlier this year. This incident highlights growing political tensions before Ugandan elections. In Côte d'Ivoire, authorities banned public demonstrations protesting the Constitutional Council's exclusion of key opposition figures from the October 25th presidential election. The council barred leaders including Tijang Fayam of PDCI, Laurent Gbagbo, Charles Blé Goudé, and Guillaume Soro, citing nationality questions or judicial convictions. Opponents organized rallies in Abidjan, demanding fair democracy and inclusion, but authorities justify the ban as necessary to maintain public order and counter misinformation. This tension revives memories of past post-electoral violence. The National Security Council instructed justice and security ministers to implement measures including prohibiting gatherings. The opposition accuses the government of manipulating justice to eliminate President Alassane Ouattara's rivals, who has not confirmed candidacy for a 4th term. Namibia's general elections extended to a 3rd day due to technical and logistical problems, marking unusual electoral chaos. The vote, initially scheduled for September 27th, saw interminable queues from malfunctioning voter verification tablets and ballot shortages. The Electoral Commission extended voting at 36 stations until September 29th, provoking opposition complaints. The Independent Patriots for Change Party accuses the commission of deliberate voter suppression. Vice President Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah, candidate for the ruling SWAPO party, aims to become the first female president. This vote proves crucial for SWAPO, which has dominated since 1990 independence, but faces growing opposition among youth and urban populations. Results could lead to a runoff if no candidate obtains 50%. In Angola, President Joe Biden made a historic visit in late September, marking the first by a sitting American president to the country. Biden met counterpart João Lourenço to discuss infrastructure investments, notably the Lobito Corridor, a rail project connecting Angola to Congo and Zambia for exporting critical minerals. This visit aims to counter Chinese influence in Africa, with American commitments in renewable energy and agriculture. Biden emphasized economic ties as Angola, rich in petroleum, pivots toward diversified partnerships. Lourenço characterized this as a turning point in bilateral relations, once strained during the Cold War. The visit also included slavery commemoration with a museum passage. Between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, an anticipated economic agreement was not signed this week, representing a setback for the U.S.-supported peace process. Negotiations in Washington on the Regional Economic Integration Framework, aimed at reforming mineral supply chains and promoting Western investment, failed due to persistent tensions. Kinshasa refuses to sign until 90% of Rwandan troops withdraw from eastern Congo, while Kigali accuses Congo of not respecting security commitments. This agreement formed part of a peace pact signed in June under the Trump administration, aiming to end Rwandan support for M23 rebels and stabilize the resource-rich region. Military reinforcements on both sides increase risks of renewed hostilities. In Seychelles, the presidential election headed to a runoff after no candidate obtained absolute majority in the first round on September 27th. Opposition leader Patrick Herminy of United Seychelles garnered 48.8% of votes against 46.4% for incumbent President Wole Ramkalawan of Linyan Democratic Seselwa. The runoff is scheduled from October 9th to 11th. This vote, with nearly 82% turnout, determines continuation of Ramkalawan's economic and environmental reforms against Herminy's promises to lower retirement age and transport fares. 8 candidates competed, with issues including management of Assumption Island, leased to a foreign developer, sparking debates on sovereignty and ecology in this tourist archipelago. In Nigeria, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu inaugurated the renovated National Theatre in Lagos on October 1st, now renamed the Wole Soyinka Cultural for Culture and Creative Arts after 4 years of renovation. This inauguration marks major investment in Nigerian cultural heritage. Meanwhile, the Mayasara Foundation allocated 100 million naira to support girls' education and underprivileged populations, contributing to continental efforts reducing educational inequalities. Chad's parliament abolished presidential term limits, allowing Mohamed Deby to govern indefinitely. The opposition characterizes this as burying democracy, raising concerns about democratic governance in Central Africa. Algeria and China deepened cultural ties by opening a new Confucius Institute in Algiers, part of a broader strategy expanding educational relations and Chinese soft power in Africa. India and Morocco inaugurated a military manufacturing facility near Casablanca, targeting joint defense production and exploiting Morocco's role as regional security hub. This strategic collaboration diversifies African defense partnerships. Tunisia strengthens ties with Tehran, signaling possible foreign policy reorientation that raises concerns among Western allies. This rapprochement shifts North African geopolitical balance. The Africa CDC recruited American senior official John Fitrell to protect funding and partnerships against Washington's global health policy changes. This appointment aims to maintain international cooperation in public health. In Europe, Moldovan President Maya Sandu secured re-election on September 28 in a contest framed as direct confrontation between European and Russian influences. The pro-European party, led by Sandu, was projected as winner despite presumed Russian interference attempts, including disinformation campaigns and covert financing. This result could accelerate EU accession negotiations while highlighting persistent geopolitical tensions in the region, with implications for Eastern European stability. International observers praised this vote as a step toward greater European integration, while calling for heightened vigilance against external interference. Europe won the Ryder Cup on September 28 in an intense competition against the United States at Bethpage Black. The European team, led by players including Rory McIlroy and Jon Rahm, retained its title by resisting a spectacular American comeback on the final day, with a final score of 14.5 to 13.5. This sporting event, attracting millions of viewers, symbolizes collective European victory and continental cohesion beyond national borders, boosting the EU's image in international sports. Beyond the course, this generated discussions about European investment in elite sports and their role in soft diplomacy. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen declared on October 2nd that Europe faces its most dangerous situation since World War II, due to the Ukraine war and vulnerabilities against powers like Russia and possible American withdrawal. At the European Political Community Summit in Copenhagen, she insisted on deeper defense integration within the EU, including increased military investment and enhanced cooperation to counter hybrid threats like drones or cyber attacks. This statement reflects growing concern among European leaders, amplified by recent incidents such as Russian airspace violations, and pushes toward reforms like strengthening the European defense shield. Discussions on transferring frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine also emerged, illustrating Europe's more assertive posture. A general strike paralyzed Greece on October 2nd, with unions protesting new laws on extended working hours, permitting days up to 13 hours. This movement halted public transport in Athens and elsewhere, testing government labor reform aimed at flexibilizing the economy to attract investment, but criticized for eroding workers' rights. Thousands of protesters marched, highlighting social tensions in a country still marked by past economic crisis, potentially influencing European debates on labor regulation within the EU. Simultaneously, the EU chief prosecutor's visit to Athens to investigate corruption allegations and misuse of European funds against the ruling New Democracy Party added political pressure. A French photojournalist was killed on October 3rd during a drone attack in Ukraine near Zaporizhia, marking a tragic loss in the ongoing conflict. This incident, reported by international media, underscores persistent risks for journalists covering the war, with over 50 professionals killed since Russia's 2022 invasion. It reinforces calls for increased media protection and highlights the conflict's impact on Europe, including massive electricity cuts caused by Russian attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure. This fits within a broader context where the EU discusses additional sanctions against Russia and increased support for Ukraine, as during European Parliament debates on airspace violations. In France, public debt alerts led to the fall of two governments within 1 week, with a fragile third forming by October 1st. The critical budgetary situation, exacerbated by high spending and weak growth, provoked internal political tensions and debates on austerity within the EU. This affects Eurozone stability, with implications for countries like Italy, pushing the European Commission to propose investment packages to stimulate continental economy. Demonstrations against the Gaza war, such as 50,000 people in Berlin on September 27th, also highlighted European social divisions on international issues. German airspace was violated by drones overnight, part of a series of incidents linked to Russia's ghost fleet that Europe seeks to counter. These violations raise growing security concerns. The European Week of Regions and Cities is scheduled for October 13th to 15th, 2025 in Brussels, under the theme Shaping Tomorrow Together. This 23rd edition will focus on three major axes: cohesion and growth for the future, the right to remain in one's region, and cities building the future. The event will gather European policymakers to discuss regional and urban challenges. The European Union mobilizes emergency support for the Democratic Republic of Congo, responding to the ongoing Ebola epidemic, while signing joint procurement contracts for COVID-19 vaccines, anticipating winter season. The EU maintains health vigilance against epidemiological threats. The ELMED interconnector project between Italy and Tunisia, described as the first direct current link between Europe and Africa, should connect Sicily and Tunisia by 2028, with 600 megawatts capacity over 220 kilometers. This infrastructure will strengthen green energy exchanges and network resilience. European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde called for toughening rules concerning finance's dark corners, notably targeting hedge funds, private equity funds, and non-bank insurers. This initiative aims to strengthen European financial stability. The Middle East witnessed potential diplomatic breakthrough as Hamas submitted its response to President Trump's peace proposal on Friday to regional and international mediators. This response marks a potential turning point in the two-year Gaza war. Hamas declared readiness to release all Israeli hostages, living or deceased, provided ground conditions for exchange are met. Trump praised this declaration and demanded Israel immediately stop bombing Gaza to safely recover hostages. World leaders reacted with cautious hope to Hamas's positive response to Trump's plan, marking a potential turning point in the conflict. However, tensions escalated following Israel's September 9th strike, targeting Hamas political leadership in Doha, Qatar, during a meeting discussing their ceasefire framework response. Although Hamas claims the attack failed to kill officials, it confirmed 5 lower-level members died. The expanded military campaign threatens to worsen Gaza's already catastrophic humanitarian situation, rapidly deteriorating since the previous ceasefire ended in March. Israel had imposed a total blockade on humanitarian aid and commercial goods entering the territory. The Integrated Food Security Phase classification confirmed in late August that famine prevails in Gaza Governorate and should extend to Deir al-Balah and Khan Yunis governorates by late September. Less than 35% of the 2,000 metric tons of daily food requirements reach Gaza. In October, the Security Council will hold its quarterly open debate on the situation in the Middle East, including the Palestinian question, with Ramiz Alakbarov as expected briefer. Council members could convene additional meetings depending on ground developments. 10 countries announced formal recognition of the State of Palestine during the resumed two-state solution conference session, bringing the total to 157 countries recognizing Palestinian sovereignty. This growing recognition strengthens the Palestinian diplomatic position. In the Americas, the southwestern United States experienced flash flooding in Arizona, causing at least 4 deaths and leaving numerous communities on alert. These events were triggered by torrential rains unusual for the season, submerging roads and residential areas, forcing authorities to conduct aerial and ground rescue operations to evacuate victims. Meteorological services warned of persistent landslide risks in mountainous regions, highlighting the growing impact of climate change on extreme phenomena in this arid part of the country. Meanwhile, the Carolinas on the East Coast declared states of emergency, anticipating a tropical storm threat that could evolve into a hurricane, with strong winds and coastal flooding forecast. Governors mobilized the National Guard and ordered preventive evacuations in vulnerable zones, while residents prepared by stockpiling supplies and reinforcing homes, recalling damages from similar past events. Politically, the United States experienced a temporary government shutdown where non-essential federal operations were suspended due to congressional budget disagreement, affecting millions of public employees and services like national parks or social aid. This blockage, occurring early in the week, was partially resolved after intense negotiations, but highlighted persistent partisan divisions approaching midterm elections, with economic repercussions estimated at several $billion in productivity losses. Additionally, President Donald Trump ordered deployment of additional troops along the southern border as part of reinforced policy against illegal immigration and drug trafficking, sparking debates on humanitarian implications and relations with neighboring Mexico. Economically, a notable trend emerges in the United States, where Americans are increasingly reluctant to relocate for job opportunities, a phenomenon attributable to factors like high housing costs, family attachments, and preferences for post-pandemic remote work. Studies show this mobility rate is at historic lows, impacting labor market flexibility and potentially slowing growth in sectors like technology or industry, particularly in large northern cities like New York or Chicago. In Mexico, an annual march commemorating the 2014 student disappearances degenerated into violence in Mexico City, injuring 94 police officers and 29 civilians during clashes with protesters. Demonstrators demanding justice for state violence and cartel victims threw projectiles and set vehicles ablaze, while law enforcement responded with tear gas and mass arrests, illustrating persistent tensions around human rights and corruption in the country. In Veracruz state to the north, drug cartel-related violence intensified with reported shootings and kidnappings, forcing thousands of residents to flee their homes and exacerbating the humanitarian crisis in this strategic region for illicit trafficking. In Haiti, more than 8,300 people have been displaced due to violent attacks in L'Estère and Bassin Bleu areas, where armed gangs intensified operations, destroying homes and causing civilian casualties. This violence wave occurs within an active hurricane season context, with 14 named storms in the Pacific, complicating humanitarian efforts and increasing flooding and disease risks for vulnerable populations already affected by political instability. The United Nations authorized a broader, more robust mission to stabilize the country, involving international forces to combat gangs and restore order, though logistical challenges persist, facing local resistance. On the environmental front, anti-drug strategies in Central America, notably Guatemala and Honduras, contribute to accelerating deforestation, threatening endemic bird species and crucial forest ecosystems. Operations destroying illicit plantations have opened lands to intensive agriculture and livestock, reducing biodiversity and increasing carbon emissions, calling for approaches revision to integrate environmental protection. In Argentina, the country is praised as a beacon for South America by U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who supports President Javier Milei's economic reforms, including swap lines, to stabilize currency and encourage foreign investment. These measures aim to lift Argentina from chronic inflationary crisis with budget cuts and deregulation that reduced inflation but increased social inequalities, potentially inspiring other struggling nations like Venezuela or Bolivia. However, Argentine lawmakers overturned 2 presidential vetoes by Milei on Thursday, marking setbacks for the libertarian leader before key legislative elections that will shape his reform program's future. These parliamentary victories weaken Malay's position. In Brazil, authorities work with the United States to organize an in-person meeting between President Donald Trump and Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, aiming to ease past tensions and strengthen bilateral relations on issues like trade and environment. This initiative could mark a diplomatic thaw, particularly in the context of COP30 that Brazil prepares, where it leads a Latin American front for ambitious climate commitments while seeking to bypass divergences with Malay's Argentina. Moreover, Brazil assembles a regional bloc with Mexico and other Caribbean countries to promote a unified voice on climate, emphasizing Amazon preservation and energy transition. Near Venezuelan coasts, an American operation against a presumed drug-transporting vessel resulted in 4 deaths, with Donald Trump asserting the cargo could kill thousands. This incident underscores escalating anti-narcotic efforts in the region, involving naval patrols and targeted strikes, but revives tensions with the Venezuelan government, accusing the United States of territorial interference. In Colombia, a diplomatic conflict deepened with the United States after President Gustavo Petro's visa revocation, exacerbating disagreements on anti-drug policy and human rights, potentially affecting internal peace agreements. Opposition Indian leader Rahul Gandhi began a 4-nation South American visit, including Brazil and Colombia, to meet political leaders, students, and business people to strengthen international partnerships and discuss cooperation in trade, education, and technology, marking India's growing interest in the region. Toyota will resume production at 2 Brazilian facilities starting November 3rd after damage and disruptions caused by heavy rains and winds that interrupted operations last month. This resumption marks Brazilian automotive industry resilience. A group of alleged scammers in Brazil using Instagram ads with deepfakes of model Gisele Bündchen and other celebrities appears to have earned millions through online fraud. This case illustrates sophisticated cybercrime evolution in Brazil. United Nations experts urged Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega's government on Friday to clarify the fate and location of over 120 people who appear to have been forcibly disappeared since 2018. This situation raises growing human rights concerns in Nicaragua. Chilean wine exports to its main Brazilian market explode, helping offset declining U.S. sales, partially due to tariffs. This trade diversification shows Chilean economic resilience. Prime Minister Mark Carney announced Friday he will return to the White House next week to meet Donald Trump as challenges with the American president remain volatile. Canada-U.S. trade and security relations will dominate Carney's agenda. Latin America and the Caribbean accelerate artificial intelligence adoption, though challenges remain in investment, talent, and infrastructure. This technological transition transforms the regional economy. In Asia, a powerful earthquake struck the Philippines on October 2, 2025, particularly affecting Cebu province, where casualties reached at least 72 deaths. According to local authorities, the quake caused significant building collapses, trapping numerous people under debris, and rescuers reported absence of life signs in several affected zones. The UN promised immediate humanitarian support, including search and rescue operations aid, plus provisions for thousands displaced. This disaster highlighted the archipelago's seismic vulnerability, with calls to strengthen infrastructure and emergency plans facing such recurrent regional events. In southern China, an exceptionally intense typhoon swept several provinces this week, leading to evacuation of nearly 2 million people to avoid massive human losses. Considered 2025's most powerful, this cyclone caused severe flooding, landslides, and widespread power cuts, affecting agriculture and transport. Chinese authorities mobilized rescue teams and military resources to distribute aid and restore essential services, while economic damages are estimated at billions of yuan. This event underscores climate change's growing impacts on Asia, with increasing frequency and violence of tropical storms. Aerial confrontations between India and Pakistan marked a tensions peak on October 4, 2025, with India claiming destruction of several Pakistani fighter jets, including Chinese and American models, during border clashes. These incidents, occurring in the contested Kashmir region, exacerbated already fragile relations between the two nuclear powers, with mutual accusations of airspace violations. Although casualty numbers were not specified, governments reinforced borders and called for international de-escalation to avoid open war. This escalation recalls past conflicts and raises questions about South Asian regional stability. India won the 2025 Asia Cup in cricket, defeating Afghanistan in the final, but victory was tainted by diplomatic controversy involving Pakistan. Pakistan's cricket board was accused of refusing to present the trophy to the Indian team, leading Indian players to symbolically pose without it during the ceremony. Rashid Khan, Afghan captain, reacted to media criticism by defending his team as Asia's second best, highlighting logistical and political challenges surrounding the tournament. This incident illustrates how sport can be affected by Asian geopolitical tensions, with calls for better cooperation within the Asian Cricket Confederation. India-China relations show thawing signs, with direct flight resumption between Kolkata and Guangzhou starting October 26, 2025, after a 5-year pause due to border tensions and pandemic. Announced by the Indian Ministry of External Affairs, this measure forms part of progressive normalization, facilitating commercial and tourist exchanges between the two Asian giants. Aviation authorities from both countries conducted technical discussions throughout the year to ensure safety and compliance, potentially opening pathways for other connections and increased economic cooperation despite persistent disputes. In Afghanistan, the Taliban regime intensified repression against women, coinciding with the 4th anniversary of their power seizure, provoking demonstrations and increased political violence. Reports document mass arrests and tightened restrictions on education and women's rights, while Afghan consulate staff in Bonn resigned protesting Taliban representatives' accreditation. This critical humanitarian situation attracts international attention, with the UN characterizing the Rohingyas' plight in neighboring Myanmar as a test for humanity, highlighting interconnected crises in Central and South Asia. The Thailand-Cambodia ceasefire is under tension, marking diplomatic relations deterioration between the two neighboring countries. Border tensions persist despite previous agreements. Myanmar condemns 16 online fraud network operators to death, illustrating growing severity of measures against cybercrime in the country. This decision fits within the fight against cross-border scams. The Philippines develops 3D-printed drones for future warfare and strengthens security alliances with wargame scenarios, including possible Taiwan conflict dominated by drone warfare. This military modernization responds to growing regional tensions. Putin's India visit tests Delhi's diplomatic balancing act facing trade tensions with the United States. This visit could deepen India's mistrust of Western demands while strengthening ties with Russia. Tokyo filed a complaint concerning a Chinese survey vessel that allegedly penetrated Japanese waters in the East China Sea for 3 days this week. This incident illustrates persistent territorial tensions between the two Asian powers. Bangkok's Climate Action Week highlighted regional climate solutions needs, with delegates urging countries to move beyond change slogans targeting realistic goals. This initiative emphasizes concrete action facing climate warming. The South Korean Unification Church leader made news within regional political tensions context, South Korean developments influence regional stability. Indonesia prepares to send 20,000 peacekeeping soldiers, marking increased commitment to international peace operations. This contribution strengthens Indonesia's role as major regional actor. In Oceania, Papua New Guinea officially signed a security treaty with Australia after weeks of delay. Named after the local word for crocodile, the Puk-Puk Treaty includes a mutual defense pact engaging each nation to assist the other in case of armed attack. The pact permits citizens of both countries to serve in either defense force and should be formally sealed within the week. This strengthened cooperation responds to growing regional security challenges. Tamika Upton became the first NRLW player to win the Dally M medal twice, while James Tedesco also won the award for a second time. These victories illustrate Australian sporting excellence. A man involved in hunting presumed police killer Desi Freeman was cleared of any connection with the fugitive after police raided a rural property. Freeman is sought for the deaths of officers Neil Thompson and Vadim DeWart Hodart. New South Wales police seek a rap musician within an investigation into a man's shooting death in central Sydney last November. This case illustrates urban security challenges in Australia. From Morocco's streets demanding reform to Gaza's fragile peace negotiations, from Europe's security awakening to Asia's natural disasters and technological tensions, from America's political turbulence to Africa's democratic struggles and the Pacific's strategic realignments. This week demonstrated the profound interconnectedness of our global challenges. The stories we've covered tonight represent lives changed, systems tested, and futures uncertain. They demand our attention, not as distant events, but as chapters in our shared human story. At Inside News, we remain committed to comprehensive coverage that refuses to overlook the voices and events shaping tomorrow. Thank you for trusting us with your time and attention. Good journey to all, and we'll see you next week.